everyone, it's Sarah here, and today we're going to show you how to make a harvest wreath using materials and supplies that you can find almost anywhere. So we use grapevine, which is easily accessible here in Norfolk. It grows wild all over the ditches and into the trees, and we have a ton of it on our property. So we're going to be using a grapevine, which you can, like I said, easily find, and all kinds of dried materials that we have harvested earlier in the season. So we harvest hydrangea and dry it, and we've got some red Russian, purple leaf that you can dry. You can even use oh golly, there's all kinds of ditch weeds you can use, and we just find all these things and we dry them through the year, and then we use them to make our harvest wreaths. And in addition to that, of course, you can use pine cones as well. So we collected some of these pine cones last year and they weren't super dry, so what we did was we just put them in the oven and they started to puff out just like they are now. So that's the wreath there. And of course you can use like lots of dried leaves and all kinds of stuff. So we're going to show you how to make a wreath. There's a few different ways you can go about doing it, but this is how we like to do it. So first you find some grapevine, and you can see we've already wound this into a wreath shape. And this one here is, oh golly, I don't know, like probably 2 feet across. So it's probably for a pretty big door. You can make it smaller or larger, whatever you'd like. And you can see it's not perfectly round, but that's kind of the part of the fun. And it's also something that after a while you don't really notice, because as you build your wreath up, you won't see all of the little kind of intricate kind of misses and misshapen parts of the wreath. So we always cut our grapevine in the winter because it's typically dead and all the leaves are dried off it, but you can cut it any time of year and let it dry. And you can see here that this grapevine isn't really thick. So the thinner it is, the easier it is to kind of wind, but you can get thicker pieces as well. The only thing that we use that's not something you can find out in nature is floral wire. So you can see it's just a green wire. It's really nice for obviously green wreaths. If you're going to do like a winter wreath, it doesn't show because it's green, but we like it because it's still really nice and malleable, and I can cut it with my scissors. So what I'm going to do is just take a piece of it. Well, I'm going to keep it attached to the roll here, and I'm just going to decide what is the start and stop of my wreath. Does it have to be the top or the side? It can be anything you want, but typically I start around 2 o'clock on my wreath. So if you're thinking about a wreath as in the numbers of a clock, around 2 o'clock is where I like to start my wreath, and that's just because then it kind of flows nicer. If you start at 12 o'clock at the top of your wreath, it's easy to kind of make a gap in that spot, and it's harder to hide. So either 2 o'clock or 4 o'clock is really nice, because at 4 o'clock, typically you can put a bow or something in that spot. So when you are working your way around your wreath, and that's the piece where both ends come together, that's a perfect place to put a bow, and no one can see the little gap maybe in your spacing. So I just wrapped the wire around the wreath. I don't know if you can see that. And I'm just going to tighten it so that the wreath is really tight. And then we'll start using our supplies. So just going to wrap it around. It takes a little bit getting used to. The other thing you can do actually is, instead of using a wire, you can use something like a twine or a cord. And that's nice because then actually the whole wreath is compostable, and you can put it in your compost at the end of the day, which is something that we do when we give wreaths away to friends and family. The downfall with using a twine is that it's harder to cinch like pieces of material onto your wreath itself. So it's probably best for experienced wreath makers, and it's not something you really want to try on your first go, but you're welcome to try if you'd like. So you can see here I just wrapped the wire around a few times just to get a good tight weave. And I'm going to start from here. So you can see that as I cinch the wire around the wreath, it's going to push all of the grapevine pieces together there. Okay, but for now I'm just going to leave it like it is. And then you want to find different types of material and place them around your wreath. So there's lots of different ways of going about doing this, but what I recommend is using 3 different types of material. So for instance, today I'll be using this red Russian, which is beautiful, purpley leaves. It's great for a fall wreath. And I'll be using this flower here. This one is what I call kind of like a ditchweed. It's a nice purpley as well. And you can find it in any kind of swampy ditches. It's beautiful and it just smells really nice when it's dried as well. So I'll be using these 2 materials. And then my other big main material that I'll be using is a few of this. This is boxwood. Okay, so we have a lot of boxwoods around the house, so I just trimmed them back and I've been drying them in these bunches. And we'll be using that as our kind of our 3rd material. And then of course we have some hydrangea, so we'll add some hydrangea, and you can see this is a nice pinky color as well. So it'll be a kind of purples and pinks, but it'll be a nice wreath. And then of course at the end we can add some other materials as well. So what you want to do is basically cut your materials so that you have bunches of each type. So I'll just go ahead and I'm gonna just cut a whole bunch of little bunches, and then I'll show you what it looks like when I'm all done. Okay everyone, so what we did was we just cut all of our bunches, and you'll be really surprised if this is your first wreath about how much material you'll need to go all the way around a wreath, particularly then one of this size. It's quite large, and so it takes quite a bit of material. So don't be afraid to cut more than you need. And also, if not all your material is dried, that's fine. You can use fresh material, like goldenrod is a beautiful one, this time of year, but it just, when it dries, it shrinks a little bit. So you want to think about that when you're placing it on your wreath. So I've got my bunches here. I've got this beautiful, what I call is just like a ditchweed, and I've got my boxwood. I didn't cut it really short because I'm not sure exactly what I'll need, and I might cut it at the time when I place it on the wreath. And then I've got my red Russian here. So my 3 main things that I'll be using. So basically what you want to do is find a nice kind of good sized bunch. It depends, you know, you can make more intricate wreaths and whatnot, but if you start with a nice bunch about this size, it'll get the wreath going really nicely, and then you can adjust from there. So what you want to do is, there's a few different theories here, but what you want to do is, okay, if this is the front, like facing me, then I would put it on the side, but just for example, I'll put it on the side here so you can see. So what I'll do is I'll wrap the flowers around. You can see how they're kind of bushing and standing out. So it depends how crazy you want to get with your wreath. You can either put them more toward the side like this so that it follows the shape of the wreath, or you can put them more out so that your wreath will be more bushy. If you put it out more like this, then that means you're probably going to need more material as you go around, because you're actually making the wreath more wide than you are just long. Okay, so for today I'm going to put them kind of something like that. And then what I'm going to do, actually I'm going to put it on this side because it's a little bit easier for me to wrap that way. Okay, so I place it and it looks kind of nice, but I'm not quite sure, but that's okay. We can always change it as we go here. So I'm just going to wrap the wire just around the base. You can see here, it's just on the base of the flowers itself. Okay, and then I'm going to wrap it a little bit further up too, just so I can get a nice secure cinch on the flowers so they don't fall off. Okay, so maybe 1 or 2 wraps, maybe 3 is about all you need. I'm going to wrap 3 here because it's my first set on the wreath, and then we'll go from there. So you can see that because the stems are moving this way, the next piece I want to put on, I want to lay on top of this piece so that it covers the stems and continues the pattern along in this direction. So then I would like to, what I want to do is alternate between the 3 different types of flowers that I have here today. So next I'm going to put in some of my boxwood here and do the same thing all over again. So I'm just going to lay my wreath down here. You can see the boxwood, I've got some longer stems here, so I'm probably just going to align them up so they're not so wonky looking. And then you can always trim the tops too. So just because it's dried, it breaks off really easily. or you can use your scissors too, okay? And just like I mentioned before, so if the wreath stem is this way, then I'll put the next bunch here like this, okay? And I can also layer it either in or out, all right? Or I can fan it across both. You can see this one's a little tall, so I can go along after with my scissors and cut it off. Right now I'm just gonna leave it like it is. And I'm gonna wrap it around my wreath and just tighten it like that. Okay, so you can see that this is where the wire is, right? So the next bunch when I put on, I'm gonna make sure it covers the wire so that no one can see the wire below. So my next pattern, next color I'm gonna put in the pattern flower is this Red Russian. So again, it's kind of wild and crazy, so I might cut it back. But for now, I'm just going to lay it on here. And again, you can decide to either put it in or out. Okay, it maybe looks nice like that. And then I'm going to do the same thing. So I'm just going to wrap my wire around. And this is really nice because I never have to cut the wire. And it's always staying tight around the wreath. All right. So there we go, twice around. And then I'll just go back to my normal color again, my first color here, which is the ditchweed. And I'll keep building the wreath out. And once in a while I might put in some hydrangea, but because it's not the main focus of my wreath, I'm just going to stay with these three. So I'll show you what it looks like when I get around to the side. Okay everyone, so we're back and we're about halfway around our wreath. So you can see that I started here at the top. I started here, right, with the first ditchweed, and I worked my way all the way around the wreath. Okay, so this is what it looked like when we first started. Started here, and you can see that it's kind of taking shape. There looks like there's a few gaps and spots, so right here, I might be able to fan it out a little bit so it looks a little bit more fuller, or that might be a really good place for a pine cone or something else. All right, I can always go back in and fill that spot if I'm not happy with it. Just wire a little bit more around and hide some pieces. But I can keep going around until I think it looks good. So you can see this is kind of a looser weave, which means that they're not layered quite on top of each other, really full and bushy out. But it is a nice kind of color context, and it won't be a wreath that really blows away in the wind when it catches the wind on your front door. So this is what it looks like so far, but you can see here, like, looks like there's a little bit of a gap. So what I might do is just fan out the purple so that it looks a little bit more full, or I can always push stuff in too if I want the wreath to be more rounded and symmetrical all the way around. So I'm just going to keep going all the way around, and then I'll show you what it looks like when we're done. So we're almost finished our wreath here. We've made it all the way around. You can see all the different colors and one stray guy there. But finishing the wreath is always the hardest part because that's where you're kind of joining the layers together. So you can see this is where we're going to join here. And so what I'm going to do is just basically put a bunch of pieces in. You can see I've got a bunch in there already. I'm going to put a few more in, and then I'm just going to fill in around it and then wire around so that it doesn't look out of place and it looks like it all fits together. And like I said, this might be a really good place if you want to put a bow, but it just takes a little bit of fiddling, and once you kind of get used to building wreaths, it gets a little bit easier as you go. So I'm just going to put it down here, and we'll see if we can keep with the coordination of the three different colors that we have, and go forward from there. So you can see that this is actually really perfect because my next color pattern after this purple guy here is actually the ditchweed. So it'll actually flow really nicely together. It'll just look like a lot of this similar color right here. So that's what I'm going to do. And you don't need a huge piece, but you can layer them on top of each other if it's not really working out. And like I said, you can move them in or out of the wreath depending on what kind of style you'd like your wreath to be in. So see here, I'm just going to put this guy, which matches this one here, kind of like this. And then I'm going to probably place another one right in here as well, so you can't really see where the wreath begins or ends. And this wreath here is using 3 totally different materials. So if you wanted something that was a little less flare in it, you could actually make a wreath of all the same material. So I've made wreaths full of this nice flower here, and I've also made wreaths full of actually like straw. So before the wheat heads are all nice, and before the combine comes along and cuts the wheat, you can cut a bunch of wheat straw and then use that to make a wreath. It's really nice too. There's lots of different materials that you can use, but I just like kind of mixing it up. And of course, these are things that I'm easy to find in the garden. So the boxwood, I mean, you have to cut it back every year anyway, so I just save all my clippings and then use it in my wreaths, even in my winter wreaths too, because it looks really nice with the other greens. So you can kind of see here it's coming together a little bit better. I'm going to keep filling it out in this little hole here, but otherwise the wreath will be pretty much finished in terms of its overall shape. And like I mentioned, after that, if you want a nicer looking wreath, you can go along and trim some of the long straggly pieces, or you can leave it just like it is. And I think here today I'm going to probably put some hydrangea into it because I just, like I mentioned, I like hydrangea, and it'll help fill out some of the spots where maybe I have a little bit of a gap, or I'm not really sure I like the way it looks. It'll just kind of fill it out a little bit. And then I'll use my pine cones again to just add some more flair if I want to the overall look of the wreath. So pine cones are great too. I've made a whole wreath out of pine cones before, and it's really easy once you get the hang of it. You just gotta wire the floral wire in the base of the pine cones, and it turns out really nice. So just gonna wire another piece in here. And again, if you're doing winter wreaths, the green floral wire is perfect because you can't see it too much, so it's really helpful. Okay, so that's kind of more like what I want it to look like. And you can see that the wreath is fully covered. Okay, so there's one that's not perfectly circular, but you can turn it so that it's the most circular way. So if this maybe that is a nice top. You can see there's a little bit of a gap here, so I'll put some hydrangea in that spot. Okay, or you can maybe make it more like an oval if you want. So that's basically the gist of the wreath. And in the back here you can see, I don't know if you can see that, but you can see all the wiring, right? That's the one downfall. As you can see the wiring there on the back, but who's looking at the back of the wreath? I don't know. But you can, if you take a good look, you can see that it's all wired shut. So it shouldn't come out. And I've had wreaths I save them year after year in the basement. Sometimes I save them depending on how beaten they've gotten over in the weather in the winter time. Of course, the green wreaths that you make it in the winter for Christmas and stuff, they'll die. But these ones here, because the flowers are all dry, you can save them from year to year. And if you really want, you can put like a clear coat on it. Some people put like hairspray on it to preserve the flowers, or a clear coat of transparent spray paint works really well too. Sometimes I do it, sometimes I don't, depending on if, you know, I am looking to keep the wreath for a long time or not. And the other thing too is you want to figure out where you'd like to put the hanger. If you're going to hang the wreath, again, you just want to wire in a little hook at the back so that you can hang it. So right now I'm just knotting the wire so that last pieces don't fall out. Okay, and then I can look to see where I want the top and put my little hanger in there. And I'll put a few pieces of hydrangea in, and that'll be it. So I'll show you what it looks like when it's all done. And this is what the finished product looks like for us tonight. Okay, so You can see we put some hydrangea in just to kind of fill it out a little bit. And I even stuck one little pine cone in there just to kind of give it a little bit of a different dynamic. But of course you don't have to do that. And if you want your wreath to look a little bit cleaner, of course you can trim all of these edges, but I think it looks kind of fun the way it is. So what we did with the hydrangea is we just took the long stem because it has a nice woody stem on it, and we just actually strung it in behind the wire that was already there. So they're really easy to pop in. And yeah, that's the look of our wreath tonight, guys. So let us know if you have any questions. We'd be happy to have you out for a workshop sometime, and have a good night. Cheers!